Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the extremely busy person behind The Beat, the comic book website that's celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. It's Heidi MacDonald. Thanks for coming on, Heidi.
Hey, David. How's it going?
It's going okay. How are you doing in the heat wave? How's life?
Well, the heat wave really sucks. It's very draining and debilitating and no end in sight. So it's been pretty much the last 3 weeks and looks like it's going to be 2 more weeks. So we don't like it. In fact, I have so many fans on right now. I hope you do a room tone for this podcast.
I can't even hear anything. You sound good.
Okay, good. Because there's a lot of fans and ACs running right now.
Can I ask you a really dumb question about the heat wave?
Sure.
When I heard it was a heat wave, I looked it up and it looked like it was around 90. And that didn't seem that atypical. Is that more atypical than I realized?
Now, you live in Alaska.
Let
me get this
straight.
You live in Alaska.
I know that. But at the same time, when I was in New York for Comic-Con in October, I don't even remember when it was. I swear to God, it was 90 then. And it was like mind-blowing that it was that hot. But at the same time, I didn't realize it was that atypical.
I think I know the time you're talking about. It was a little while ago, right? It's before the pandemic, right?
I think it was 2019, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, in October, I hate to use this cliche, but it's a dry heat. The air is a little cleaner. I mean, the thing that shocks me about this heat wave is first that it goes on so long. I mean, I haven't seen any records or any, I don't know if it's a record-breaking heat wave or whatever, but I do know that when I pour a drink and, put some ice in the drink and leave it on the table, immediately there's a puddle around the drink from condensation. And I don't remember that before. I mean, it's just so extreme that it's so hot and humid and just, without an end.
I'm sorry you're having to deal with that because that sounds like a lot. It is like 64 degrees in Anchorage, so I cannot understand it.
Oh my God, that sounds amazing.
It is also very sunny, but at the same time, it's 64, so some people might be wearing jackets, but it is not the only thing that's hot in your world. This entire podcast was not meant to be a discussion about one main topic. It's going to start as a discussion about one main topic because we're recording this on Wednesday, July 10th. We're going to be talking about a discussion about questions we have heading into San Diego Comic-Con, but now one of the biggest questions has been answered. It's the news that dropped that said that Penguin Random House is buying Boom Studios. Obviously, we don't know a lot about what this means yet, especially in terms of any potential cost for current employees, and we wish them all the best. But
yes,
you have spent all day on the Beats phone. You've been making the magic happen. What is your read on the move?
Yeah, the bat phone has been ringing. Well, I think the main thing to understand about this is that Boom has been up for sale for quite a while. It has been for sale since before the pandemic. And I heard rumors about this before the pandemic is an inappropriate term to use now. So, 5 years, at least 5 years that Boom has been on the block. And I mean, I've talked to people who were pitched to buy Boom and have seen the pitch deck and, maybe they kicked the tires, maybe they did a little due diligence and so on and so forth. So I think it's been unknown in the industry that Boom was on the block. Boom was available. And the fact that I didn't find a buyer.
Right.
Is a little bit telling, I think. From looking at the exterior, you do see Boom as a thriving publisher. They seem to have a very good mix of licensed titles and originals, right? I mean, licensed titles, they jumped on Adventure Time. I mean, we can talk a little bit more about some of the groundbreaking things that Boom did, but they had Adventure Time, and now they have Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. They have some really good licensed books, but they have great creator-owned IP. Obviously, Lumberjanes is one that everybody talks about. They purchased Archaea. That came with like Mouse Guard and
The Killer.
The Killer, yeah.
Became a David Fincher movie.
Right. And of course, right now there's the James Tynion and the Erika Slaughter universe, and which is wildly successful. And so, yeah, on paper, I mean, from all outside observations, and former Boom president Filip Sablik, the warm, comforting presence of the industry with his industry slideshows. I believe you saw one at Comics Pro, right, David?
I did, yeah. And also I ran his one from this year, which was very Ted Lasso themed on Sketched. And so I had a full look at that. It even included a Photoshop of Philip as Ted Lasso, which was not something I ever expected to see in my life.
Right.
That does kind of speak to his folksy charm in the sense that people like him. He does have kind of Ted Lasso vibes. He was very much a part of why people really rooted for Boom and why people thought that they were watching out for him. And he was the director or president of sales and marketing, and he is now out as of today, the day we're recording.
Yes, that's right. But of his own volition, let's be clear on that. He left for another mystery job. So yeah, so from all outside appearances, you would say like Boom seems to be a company that's doing quite well. But, they were on the block for a long time. So what does that tell us? I think it's fair to say that I would play hot stove league with people in the industry, and with the name Boom would come up and be like, oh, they're for sale. So who would buy them?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. Have we ever done this game? Because nobody, who would you have said before today? Who would you have said would buy Boom?
I have absolutely no idea. It's kind of like with Dark Horse. Dark Horse got bought by Embracer Group, which is a company that I'd never heard of that owns everything, apparently. And it's probably would have been one of those like shadowy organizations that I know nothing about. I would not have bet on Penguin Random House, but also it makes as much sense as anything else, right?
Yeah. And so I think the choices, like if you ran down every other comics company, the last time a existing comics company purchased another comics company was, I think, about 5 years ago when Lionforge bought Oni, although it was pitched as Oni buying Lionforge, which isn't what actually happened.
It depends on what size you're talking about. Did that come before or after Mad Cave buying Paper Cuts?
Oh, that's true. Actually, you're right. That was more recent. So yes, that was a deal. That was an acquisition that was more recent than that. So, I would argue that Paper Cuts was an imprint, but it was a publisher. So good call on that. I guess before that,
it doesn't happen a whole lot.
No, it doesn't happen a whole lot. IDW bought Top Shelf.
Mm-hmm.
Boom bought Archaea, as we mentioned, and that was like a good 15 years ago. And nothing else jumps to mind. Can you think of any other acquisitions?
Not really, but I want to ask you the question that I've been asked several times today, and I feel like I have a pretty good read on it. It seems pretty obvious why Boom was willing to sell, in the sense that we know that they've been willing to sell for half a decade now, basically. Why do you think Penguin Random House is doing this, save for the fact that they love buying everything?
This is the question that filled my DMs as well, David. So you and I, obviously, probably some of the same people were asking us this question. Yeah, so that's a question that I've asked quite a few times. They do want to buy everything. Penguin Random House it's not the biggest publisher by revenue, because there's actually a trade publisher that makes more money, but they're certainly probably the largest, and certainly, they're the Walt Disney of publishers. They're the biggest, they're probably the most renowned and most successful in that way. And everybody really looks to Random House as an industry leader. And they recently bought, in this century, they bought Penguin, and they tried to buy Simon & Schuster, which would have reduced the top, I believe, 5 publishers to 4, and the Department of Justice said that's not a great idea. That's a monopoly. So they actually shut down the deal. So Random House, or PRH, cannot buy any more big, giant publishing companies. So I guess they're going to have to grow by acquiring smaller companies. And I asked one person who actually knows the answer, and they just said it's part of the great game.
Yeah. Now, I do want to emphasize, I don't know the answer. It sounds like you might have some sense as to the answer, but at the same time, there's going to be a lot of hypothesis about what this means and about what's happening and what it's going to mean down the line and stuff like that. We don't really know. We could guess. We can make estimations as to what would happen, but to some degree, especially what I'm saying is going to be just a read of kind of what the environment is. I imagine it. Somebody asked me, do you think it has anything to do with film rights? I'm sure it has something to do with that.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It actually doesn't. Think about it.
Why?
Traditional book publishers, New York publishers, trade publishers, they don't really do media rights.
They don't, but if you buy a company that already has partial rights, then you might do it now. But let's put that off to the side.
Yeah. So circle back, though. It's very interesting.
I do think a part of it is the fact that they've been on sale for 5 years, and it's probably to some degree a distressed asset where you can get a whole bunch of things that are revenue earners at probably, I have no idea what the deal was, but let's just say a discounted rate. And it turns out that if you can get like, Berserker, you can get like Keanu Reeves and that whole thing, and you can sell those, that would probably do well for you. You can do all of James Tynion stuff with like the Slaughterverse and everything. That's a good seller. There's all kinds of things that are like evergreen sellers, like Lumberjanes and Giant Days and stuff like that, to varying degrees. I don't want to make it seem like they're like selling Dogman numbers or something like that.
There's a lot there. Boom has a lot of successful publishing entities. A great backlist, as we put it.
Exactly. And so they're acquiring something that will make them money that's not going to cost them a lot of money. And it turns out that accountants love things like that.
Yeah. I'm going to back up to one story, a story that broke in January, which you probably remember, but Random House is publishing the novelization of Berserker written by China Miéville. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Remember that? A Book of Elsewhere, a novel by China Miéville and Keanu Reeves. So Random House already had skin in the Berserker game. And I think they had already had skin in a lot of these games that Boom had skin in. So it was for sale. They had some money and they bought it. I think when we're asking ourselves what the reason is, I honestly think it might not be that far from being that simple, to be honest.
Yeah. A company likes money. Boom.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't mean to do that. That boom was unintentional. But, well, and also, I mean, not to like, make connections where there aren't connections. There is actually overlap there. The person who runs Inklore used to work at Boom.
And so does the person who runs Random House Graphic, Whitney Leopard.
Yeah. So both of them used to work at Boom. I'm not saying that's the reason why they did it, but there is connection there and it probably offers unique insights into how it works. And so if anyone's going to be primed to make a deal where they acquire Boom, that would make sense.
It absolutely would. And, just to point out, like so many Boom employees have gone on to be in positions of influence in industry, like Whitney Leopard at Random House Graphic, like Rebecca Taylor at Inklore, their new imprint, and like Morgan Perry. She works for, she just went to Square Enix, right. But, previously at Skybound, where she had a big impact. And, Devin Funches, he works at Diamond now. And Chip Mosier, he worked at Boom for a while. So the list goes on and on. The mystery in the room, Filip Sablik, where is he going?
Well, and that's the funny thing is like one of the core things I wanted to talk to you about is we're going into San Diego Comic-Con, and it seems like there's just a lot of like big questions that are hanging out there. And what is Filip doing is one of the big ones, because Filip was leaving on his own volition. Filip was, a huge part of Boom and is clearly like doing something else. What is that? I'm sure that is going to be one of the big topics that people talk about when it's at BarCon and when it's at everything else, or just even on the show floor. I mean, people are probably wondering.
So everybody's wondering. Everybody also wonders where Jamie Rich at IDW is going, and everybody assumes they're going to the same place. Nobody I've talked to, and believe me, I talked to, the Huggy Bears of the comics industry. They are on the street and they hear what's happening, right?
Did you just make a Huggy Bear reference?
Of course I did, because I don't know. I don't watch Law and Order and CSI, so I don't know who the informants on the contemporary shows are, but I know there was Huggy Bear on Starsky and Hutch, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a first for the podcast. So I'm very excited about this.
Well, when you have old people on, you never know what we're going to come up with. So anyway, nobody has said where Filip is going or where Jamie is going. They do all agree that they are going to the same place. So that is my working hypothesis, that they are going to the same startup venture of some kind or another. But yeah, we don't know where two of the most successful and industry leaders. I mean, as we just talked about how influential Filip has been with his folksy slideshows, and Jamie has been editor-in-chief at 3 or 4 different companies. I mean,
and ran the Batline and was a big part of Vertigo and things like that. I do think it's interesting to think about because, Scott Dunbier left IDW and has started his own thing. Today, it also came out that there's 23rd Street Books, the adult graphic novels sister imprint. The First Second is coming in fall 2025, also ran by Mark Siegel. So not that big of a transition there. And that like DSTLRY is now distributing solely through Diamond. That one doesn't feel quite as big, but it does seem like there are a lot of big things happening. What the hell is going on, Heidi? Is this just like typical buildup, or is this different than usual?
It is, but I mean, you left out the other one, which is still rumored, but, DC is going to have their, ultimization plans for their whole line with apparently it's going to be called the Absolute Universe. So, the rumors about that have been going out for a while, but a Nash can got leaked this week. So that seems a little bit more concrete. So, we don't know all the details of that yet, thank God. But I mean, I like some of the surprises to come out at the con. Obviously, DC was planning a big reveal to be at Comic-Con, and let them do it. Let them compete with Kevin Feige. Let them compete with Lord of the Rings. Let them try to steal some of the Comic-Con thunder. So what is going on? Well, I mean, as Filip said, he said this at I think the Diamond Lunch at Comic-Con last year. It is a time of chaos and uncertainty. Mm-hmm. So it really has been a time of chaos and uncertainty in the comics industry, just in terms of, we hit these pandemic highs, and then we started to hit pandemic declines. And we're definitely not, at least as far as books go, as far as manga goes, we're still far ahead of 2019, or at least ahead of 2019. We might not be that far ahead. So I think there was this period of enormous prosperity, and everybody got pretty excited about it. But the comics industry, being the comics industry, they didn't think it was going to last. So luckily, I don't think there's any company that just invested stupid, bought a building and hired 100 people, that kind of thing. So they all stayed fairly prudent, but things have, sales have declined. Sales are down. So I think everybody was just planning, what do we do now? And you said it yourself. I think the last time we might have just been gossiping, to be honest, but I think you wrote a piece about this, that a lot of the issues that are facing, like the direct market in particular, are issues that were looming in 2019, and the shut-in nature of the pandemic years masked it, and now these issues are back.
Yeah, I absolutely think that that's true. And I do think, I sent you this earlier. I'm certain you had no time to read it because your day has been absolutely insane. But one of the things I thought was really interesting is I released my retailer feature where I checked in with retailers, an array of retailers halfway through the year just to see where things are at. I have to say, surprisingly positive, and from a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. Even the people who were down were positive in unusual ways.
Really?
Yeah, I was very impressed. And it was pretty across the board, even ones who were really down, like in terms of sentiment, not necessarily in terms of sales. The last couple of check-ins I did were feeling a lot better. Now, granted, that is not everyone, but it did include some of the biggest accounts, like with Third Eye Comics from Steve Anderson and also Christina Merkler from DCPS. So they're seeing good things, which typically portends some pretty positive things. Granted, Steve Anderson is also the single most positive person in the entire comic industry, so you always have to keep that in mind. But I don't know. I mean, it is kind of an interesting moment because I don't think you would have all of this kind of splintering towards new publishers or new companies if they didn't see opportunity. And maybe I'm just looking with rose-colored glasses on. I'm not sure.
Well, I think everybody who's survived this long in the comics industry knows that the comics industry will survive, and
it's cyclical.
It's cyclical. I mean, it's I think my closing quote for my San Diego wrap up last year was from Jen King of Space Cadets, and she was just like, we faced these issues before, so we know we'll get through them. And that's true. They faced worse before. Of course, now her store is like, been hit by a hurricane and has no power. So I just saw that that whole part of Texas doesn't have any power right now. Been there, done that. So good luck to everybody. It's no fun.
Wait, I will say Jen was actually one of the positive ones. She moved this year, and her new location is actually doing really well.
Jen is another person who's incredibly optimistic and positive.
Yes,
she puts a positive spin. That said, if you do read Publishers Weekly, you'll notice that book sales have stabilized and are beginning to rise slightly. Now that's compared to last year, which was pretty much a toboggan ride downhill in sales from the pandemic level. But even so, like these numbers, it wasn't like most categories were down 50% or double digits. And I mean, it was like 10%, it was down, but it wasn't like these insanely bad numbers in most categories. Some categories were down quite a bit, but overall it wasn't really that bad. And I mean, manga actually did fall pretty precipitously, but it fell from such a
insane height.
Yeah. So book sales have stabilized. Book sales and might even be on the upswing, and that's from BookScan. So these are heartening numbers. I think we had a correction last year. People have been stuck in the house for 3 years. We're reading and watching TV all the time. And then they started to leave the house again. And like all the time, like they didn't want to be at home. And now I think we're seeing a more normalized. I think like the pressure is equalized.
I
So,
also think that to some degree, a lot of the things that were happening last year that really had started kind of in late 2022. I think a lot of publishers were starting to adjust. It's just like they can't do it immediately. It always has to take like
right.
12 to 18 months. And I think now we're starting to see some of their moves that are stabilizing, and I think it's working to some degree. And also it helps like in terms of like the direct market, there's been a number of like actual hit books, which has helped. And actually, you know, one of the interesting things I found was that graphic novels, in at least with direct or comic shops, seem to be more of a struggle. And Patrick Brower from Challengers, he pointed out that the first half of the year actually was a little light on releases. And I wonder if the second half is just going to be really busy, or maybe that's just because I'm thinking about the Charles Burns book and it's going to do so well.
Well, right. Yeah. I mean, will it? I mean,
I don't know.
I mean, Pantheon put out his previous book in 3 installments as he did them. And this time they let them be published in France and just put out the collection. So, if that serialization had been super successful from Pantheon, they probably would have done it again.
That's
So,
true. That's true.
yeah. I mean, I'm not sure about the number of books coming out. I mean, we've lost a couple of publishers. Aftershock is no more, basically. I mean, Scout, who the hell knows what's going on there? I mean, they might not have been contributing a lot of books to the output, but they were contributing some. So, and then I think some other publishers did see the handwriting on the wall and might have been like, okay, let's not expand right now. I mean, IDW has also pulled back quite a bit.
Yeah, well, and this also includes book market publishers. So I don't know. I think we're just going to get a heavy second half. But before we move on from Boom, I did want to bring up one last thing involving the whole Boom deal. This was something you originally wrote in your article that I don't remember how you phrased it. You either said you think that this will result in, or you said that this is happening involving Boom using Penguin Random House for single issue distribution. But then the actual press release came out and said Boom is staying with Diamond comic distributors for now for single issue distribution. You and I have already talked about this offline. We think it's an exclusivity thing where it's...
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. PRH distributes its imprints. It distributes the publishers that it owns. So
yeah, that's one of its great strengths. It's both.
yes. Yeah. So for sure. I mean, the fact that they bought the company, they probably could have done some kind of, force majeure on the contract, but they didn't. They're honoring the contract with Diamond and with Simon and Schuster. So also to give them time.
Right.
Because they are like, I think the biggest book distributor or one of the biggest big book distributors. So it's going to give them time to absorb Boom into their system. So, I mean, I wouldn't make too much of that. For sure, when the contract is up, they will be going to PRH. So, but there was that other little deal with Distillery going exclusive with Diamond, whereas before they had been Lunar and Diamond. And, I think Distillery tried to position this as, more big news. And, so I'm not trying to poo-poo it. It is definitely news that they were going exclusive with Diamond. So I guess there's life in Diamond. I mean, what did you make of that?
I have no idea. I mean, honestly, like I think I made this comment before, but Diamond to me seems like a horror movie villain where they basically can't die. It's like Jason from Friday the 13th just lumbering on eternally. And so I think that they have enough going on that like as long as they have some publishers they can keep going. But I mean, who's their biggest publisher now? Dynamite?
Well, I mean, it was Boom.
It was Boom. I mean, okay,
Yeah.
once let's assume that Boom leaves, then it's probably Dynamite, and Dynamite's not that big. It's just It's really fascinating. I keep wondering when Diamond is going to get to the point where they're just like, is it still worth it doing single issue distribution? Because their volume is so low compared to where they were. I have no idea if they're ever going to get there, but
listen, there was some kind of Diamond thing that came out a month or so ago, and some retailers would leak it to me, but I didn't have time to write up a story about it, which I feel bad about. But it was like Diamond is launching some kind of collectibles portal. Did you see this?
No, but it sounds like something they would do.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like something they would do, but I'm surprised that I didn't see more online aghastness at this because, a lot of times it's a very codependent relationship between comics, direct market retailers and Diamond, because they both have these quirks from having been, founded 30, 40, 50 years ago. And still in some case, Diamond famously used what was it, 1997 Windows software until about 2015. So, that was ridiculous. But comics retailers, a lot of them are proud that they don't have POS systems and so on. So one of the reasons I'll be at a Diamond Retailer Summit and Diamond will say something like, we're going to give you access to some new kind of shipping discount, right? But you have to sign up for it. And then some retailers say, but if we give you our customers, you will steal it and start selling comic books.
Right.
And so there's always been this super distrust. That's one of the things about Lunar, which is DCBD, right? Or
DCBS.
Yeah, that they do sell comics already, so they already have all that customer information. But there's a huge distrust of giving Diamond your customer information. So this initiative, which I'm sorry I can't find it in any of my open windows here, but there's been a flood of information coming to Stately Beat Manor. But yeah, it did seem like a little bit weird to me that it sounded like kind of the retailer's worst nightmare, and then it was even stranger that I didn't see Brian Hibbs going ham on it. So look, Diamond is trying to adapt as best they can.
Yeah.
In their own way. So, will they give up on periodicals? No. I do think that the comic book, when we say periodicals, we mean the comic book. I do think the comic book is going to stick around as a format for a long time in its own way.
I completely agree. The thing is, though, is just there is like a point where it seems like they just don't have enough volume. Now, granted, they still do the reselling of like Marvel and a number of other publishers that go through PRH, I think. And speaking for my own experiences, my shop, I believe, still orders Marvel through Diamond. And so I know that there are shops that do that, even though I'm 100% certain that it's more expensive doing it that way. But you work with what you know and you work with what works for you. And some shops just want to do that. So they probably do have more volume than we realize. It feels a little weird. Respect to Distillery, but I just don't know if that offsets all of the other losses. But I don't know.
Distillery certainly has some very ambitious plans.
And they got some big names. Now, I have heard a lot of criticism of their format, which is deliberately not like a comic book. It's more like a magazine format. It's got a higher price point, which, that's one of the problems people always have. Is like, well, the comic book is only $4. I can't make any money selling a $4 comic book or a $5 comic book. All right, raise the price. Oh, I can't sell a $6 comic book. That's too expensive. So, there is no sweet spot. There's no magic price point that the comic book seems, viable at, really. Yeah.
So people are trying different things, and then it's like, oh, it's the wrong size. I can't fit this on my rack.
Yeah, it is funny. I told you before we started recording, I think I told you about the Distillery part. Distillery actually earned some kudos in my retailer feature. And one of the things that multiple shops emphasized is that people basically eventually grew to realize that they like the comics enough to offset their distaste of the large format and high cover price. I do think that there is something to say that people are price sensitive when it's something that they don't like, but they're less price sensitive when it's something that they do like.
Yes, of course. Value, you want that satisfying chunk. You want the value for your money. And obviously Distillery, the books that I've read of theirs are very high quality.
Yep.
And the format is actually very, very readable and beautiful. It's actually more readable than a 32-page pamphlet.
Do you know who designs those?
Who is it?
Tiny Onion, James Tynion's company.
Oh, that's right. Well, it's Courtney, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Courtney Menard.
Yeah. I worked with Courtney when I worked with Z2. She was at Z2, and that's why a lot of their books looked absolutely gorgeous. So, very talented designer.
Yeah. It's just funny, though. It's like this little secret thing that's on the inside cover that I wouldn't have even noticed if I hadn't interviewed Courtney about her new role as, I think it's director of production at Tiny Onion. Mm. And it's just one of those funny little things that Distillery is doing. And it seems to be really helping the books. The books look great. And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Convention season is upon us, but don't forget to support your favorite creators on Zoop. There's still time to get the Breed Omnibus from the legendary Jim Starlin, as well as Sway's gorgeous art book Swayonce. Zoop also have launches from huge names like Christian Ward, Sanford Green, Bill Morrison, Franco, and Babylon 5's Claudia Christian coming this month. And don't forget to check out the e-commerce store on Zoop, where you can buy books from successfully funded campaigns like Axe Wheeler John by Nick Patera or the Eisner-nominated Comics for Ukraine anthology. For creators looking to crowdfund your project or have your books for sale in Zoop's brand new e-commerce marketplace, Fill out the form on their Submit Your Project link on their website. And now, back to the show. Anyways, well, let's move on from that. I do want to bring up San Diego Comic-Con. You've been to a lot of them before. I wanted to get your take on, I mentioned before, it seems crazy to me. I remember last year, one of the things I wrote about San Diego Comic-Con, and granted it was, the year of the strikes. It was the year of a bunch of different things. It seemed really quiet, even for comic news.
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling in the build up to this? Like, does it feel like it's going to be another quiet one, or does it feel like it's going to be kind of crazy?
Well, I think we're already seeing a blast of crazy news. And I think Absolute DC, I do think it's a real shame that it leaked, 2 weeks ahead of time to the point where I felt comfortable enough to report about it,
Yeah.
but people sent me screenshots of this ash can. So, and then, other sites covered it. So I was like, I kind of have to go in on this. So, although I noticed no one else has, so that's interesting.
I was going to write about it on Friday, but I don't really do news in the same way you guys do.
I think DC is really trying to keep it under wraps. It did leak, but not all the details. I mean, there's still lots of twists and turns to come in Absolute universe. So, just as far as news goes, I guess I knew about this at last Comic-Con. I knew that DC was planning to Ultimize,
Right.
And I felt that last year when the WGA strike and the SAG strike meant that there wouldn't be any real entertainment news at the con. So that huge attention drain that everyone complains about wouldn't be there. So, Jim Lee had on his panel, he was like, Comic-Con's for comics again. And, like we ran that on the site, and it got like, an insane traffic, like Facebook shares were off the charts. So, people like that message. So they had this incredible opportunity and they just weren't able to pivot fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
They were not able to pivot to, get corporate to sign off on it. In the case of Marvel and DC, I guess they weren't able to get Disney and Warner Brothers Discovery to sign off on anything. And, I think Marvel announced that Greg Capullo was coming back. Hurrah! There was really no groundbreaking news last year.
Not at all.
Comic-Con. So it really was a bummer. I think, there was I forget, there was one of those team ups they always announce, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Holly Hobby or something,
I was hoping you were going to go with a random example. I like that one.
Yeah. But they weren't, for whatever reason, they weren't able to take advantage of it. And it was such a missed opportunity. But I think I think publishers, now go into Comic-Con thinking like, oh, there's, we can only get so much traction. And also, I just think they, for the reasons that we've already talked about in this podcast, they just weren't ready in 2023. So I think the opposite is happening this year. I think they're really trying to blow the doors off, But from what I've seen, I would say that Hollywood is coming back big time too. Like, we haven't heard if Warner Brothers is going to be there. James Gunn has said he's not going, which I think is a huge missed opportunity, but okay, whatever. I'm sure you have your reasons. But, Marvel is coming back. Kevin Feige is coming back to Hall H. And so I think the competition is going to be very fierce, but it just feels like everybody's ready for this to be a big blaster of a Comic-Con again.
I agree. I do think that one thing that we do need to emphasize involving all of this stuff, whether it's Boom or it's the Absolute stuff, is that, I saw some people talking about, like, what does this mean for Jeff Lemire's new book that he just announced, or like that was just announced like a week or two ago? And the answer is nothing, because it's not like Boom was surprised that they sold. They didn't sell it today. They've been working on this for a very long time, I'm absolutely certain. So like Jeff Lemire was probably making that book with the expectation that this was going to happen. So it's business as usual in terms of publishing, just like with the Absolute stuff. It's like sometimes this stuff just takes time.
It does. It takes a long time. But also, I pointed this out to a few people today, but Penguin Random House comes from the book publishing world.
Thinks in years.
Yeah, which has a better tradition of treating creators than the comic book industry does.
Mm-hmm.
There's no such thing as creator owned in book publishing, because of course it's
That's everything.
You don't even need that term, because all books are owned by the creators in book publishing. So unless it's a licensed book, which is of course does happen, but PRH is actually They do have a lot of licensed titles, but they don't own any IP. There's nothing you could say the Bertelsmann Group's, Fabulous Augie Doggy, you know, or my God, they own Huckleberry Hound.
Do they actually own Huckleberry Hound?
No, they don't.
Okay. I have no idea who owns what. You could tell me I own Huckleberry Hound and I would not be surprised.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, a lot of those Hanna-Barbera characters are owned by Cartoon Network, owned by Warner Brothers, owned by Warner Bros. Discovery, and which is its own, big disaster now. But, the 90s was the golden age of licensing, and really was like, you show me yours, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. But, obviously Warner's and Disney have the biggest war chests of IP, but Universal has its Monsters and King Kong, and they also own like Chilly Willy or something like that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I used to go to the licensing show. David, you should go to the licensing show someday.
I feel like it sounds really interesting. I like the idea of it.
It is very interesting. They used to be in New York. I went every year. Now it's in Vegas. So I doubt that I'll ever go again. But you're young and hydrated. You can go.
I'm definitely hydrated at least. Yeah, I mean, I do think the interesting thing is like there's so many. I've talked to so many creators, specifically related to comics, who have said that they know a lot of people who are like a lot of other creators who are building up things that they're kind of trying to position it coming out of basically like 2023 being a struggle. They wanted to like do big things in 2024 and 2025. And I do wonder if we're going to start seeing some more of that at San Diego, because it seems like everything is ready for it. Everyone's kind of building up the anticipation for it. We know that there's going to be big things, but I also am fully ready for there to be some very big surprises. And it's going to be interesting to be in the mix of it.
Well, I hope so.
Well, yeah. But I mean, a lot of times it kind of feels like we know the secrets before they kind of come out. Like, you knew about the PRH Boom thing like a month ago, and I found out from you this morning, and you're like, I was completely off on that one. It is interesting, though, because it feels like there's a lot of big stuff coming, and I'm going to be really interested to see it. Of course, I'm probably going to be so overwhelmed by the con, I'm not even going to know what the hell is happening.
Well, so David, I mean, I think this whole podcast should be me interviewing you about your expectations for Comic-Con. And then afterwards, tell what, you come on my podcast afterwards, you could talk about what it was actually like for you, because
I'm definitely going to write about it because it's going to be an interesting experience.
The Con Diary, we call it the Con Virgin Diary. Keep that diary.
I will. Okay, here's a good question for you. I've been to New York. I've been to other cons. How different is it really?
Very. Ricky, our writer, Ricardo Serrano Dennis, came last year for the first time, and he had a blast because he got to meet Junji Ito, his idol. But as he pointed out, I mean, I'm jaded. I've been going for 40 years. This will be my 40th Comic-Con. Wow. So I have my own thoughts, but I am pretty, it's begun to run together into one big pudding now. So, but Ricky pointed out that the biggest difference is, well, there's two biggest differences. The first biggest difference is the weather is absolutely ideal. It's absolutely perfect. San Diego is the most temperate city in the contiguous United States. So the weather, I mean, it did rain, sprinkle once in a while, but the weather's perfect. So you don't really have to worry, but it does get cold at night. So make sure you bring a jacket or a hoodie of some kind. I
could regret this, but I am from Alaska.
You are, but I'm just telling you, even I am like, oh, how cold can it get? And I'm always like, oh my God, I got to go buy a sweater. I forgot.
I know.
Yeah. So just bring a hoodie. You must have a hoodie, right?
I have to tell you a quick story within your story. When I first went to Texas, my wife is from Texas. I went to San Antonio to meet her family and everything. And we went on the Riverwalk. I don't know if you've ever been to San Antonio, but they have this Riverwalk and they have like this boat tour you can take where it takes you through the water and everything. And it was in December, but I was like, Texas in December, how cold can it really get? It turns out it's a different type of cold. And I ended up having to buy a coat immediately after we got off that boat because it was cold as hell. And so as much as I say, I'm from Alaska, I don't need things like that, every once in a while, it's a very dumb thing to say. It's
also just it's a dry cold, and it just, I mean, if you've been to Los Angeles, it's the same, it gets at the desert. It just gets a little cool and chilly at night. So just if anybody's listening, hasn't been, just bring a warm jacket. You're better safe than sorry, or just a jacket of some kind.
I love jackets. I got tons of jackets. What's number 2 from Ricky?
Was that in New York, when you walk out of the Javits, you walk on 36th Street, to get a cab, because you can't get a cab there. But if you walk towards the city, like by the time, you're on 12th Avenue, by the time you get to maybe not 11th because the subway is there, but by the time you get to 10th Avenue, you're pretty much out of the con. By the time you get to 9th Avenue, you're back in New York City. And you might see some people here and there with badges running around, or a couple people in cosplay, but you're back in New York. New York is so all encompassing that New York Comic Con fades very, very quickly. In San Diego, the whole downtown is taken up by Comic Con.
Yeah.
And it's not as large an area as New York, but you have to walk quite a ways before you escape Comic Con. And it's really, we call it Brigadoon. I mean, it's just really magical how from the harbor to the downtown Broadway it's all one big Comic Con. It's all one big party. It's all one big crazy experience. And that is what you will find is the biggest difference. That is, you can't really escape Comic Con unless
you're David Harbour, Coronado Island, like I am.
You booked a hotel on Coronado Island, which I hope you don't regret that.
I have been told by somebody who goes to Comic Con or San Diego Comic Con every year. I shouldn't say this because he specifically said don't say this, but he was like, that is the secret. He's like, it is so awesome. No one knows how great it is to stay over there during Comic Con. It's perfect. I liked his perspective more than yours, where you were like, you may have made a huge mistake.
Well, here's the thing. It depends on your personality. If you have a certain personality, and you know what, you and your wife might actually have this kind of personality. It is. Look, you're going to Coronado. It's absolutely a great experience to go stay in Coronado. It's a beautiful place. It's an incredible vacation destination. It's really quaint, blah, blah, blah. You have a great time. Just staying in Coronado in and of itself is a fantastic experience. Okay.
But you're out of the mix.
You're out of the mix. But I mean, not really. I
can always take like a Lyft or Uber over after.
You can, but I will say this. It's more like the New York Comic Con experience. In New York, people stay in Brooklyn and Queens, people stay in New Jersey. So that's one of the reasons why con dissipates so quickly. The con magic dissipates so quickly. I say con magic. You can tell I'm an addict, but so in San Diego, part of the magic, I mean, I can't tell you how many weird experiences I've had walking back to my hotel at night after the Eisners, or, after some rooftop party or after something, that walk back to your hotel, sometimes it's a cab ride, but, that's part of the magic. And I think maybe for like I said, I don't know you. You're not my bestie. It's not like, we've gone on vacation together, but, I know a little bit about your personality. And I think for you, it's going to be okay. I'm
flexible. Yeah. I sometimes like my peace and quiet. I will say I kind of expected that part, the fact that it's so all encompassing, because my wife has been before. And when she went, she went to a Walking Dead survival experience, Walking Dead escape during the con. And it was at Petco Park where the Padres play.
That's right.
And when you have events that have to take place at baseball stadiums, that's when you know that you kind of dominated the space in a very real way.
Yes. And as I understand it, she was for Coronado, right?
She was for Coronado, yeah.
Okay,
I mean, so we're also going early, so.
Yeah, I didn't realize that she'd been. So if she's been and she approved of Coronado, then I think you're going to be fine.
She hated the shuttle experience.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing like staying at the Marriott or the Hilton, the Gaslamp. When you're at a close hotel, that's the experience.
Is there like a level to this where it's like the people are close?
Oh, yeah, of course. Oh, 100 billion%. Are you kidding? Like competition for those close hotels. This is the hottest competition at the show. The hottest club in town, as Stefan would say.
I did have a patron question from another San Diego experience person. It's a fellow podcaster, Chris Hacker, asked, since this is David's first San Diego Comic-Con, live congrats on the well-deserved Eisner nom, David. That's what he wrote. I am not just randomly saying that about myself.
Yeah.
And you are, I'm sure, a pro at this point. Is there a particular bar/restaurant/part of San Diego that David should check out while in town? Also, can you give him and listeners a 30-second rundown on everyone's favorite after-hours industry event, HotelCon?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's, I hesitate to give these things because it can be a bad experience, but it never seems to work out. I don't think it's any secret. I mean, I've written about it enough, but the Hyatt bar has been in years past the number one go-to bar, and it's huge. I mean, it's big enough to encompass a pretty enormous party. But yeah, the Hyatt used to be where everybody hung out at. And in fact, I think when was it? It was 22, the first show back, that the Hyatt bar was under being renovated. And this was a huge heartbreak for a lot of people. So, or it might have been 2019, to be honest. I think it was 2019 that it was. Anyway, there was this one year when the Hyatt was under construction, and everyone was like, "How will Comic-Con survive? This is this is terrible." So the Hyatt was the one. I mean, I think the two closest hotels are the Hyatt and the Hilton Bayfront. So you'll find some of the action has shifted to the Hilton Bayfront, but there are other secret bars that people go to that I am not going to name on this podcast, and because they are still secret, and it's kind of amazing. So I, at this point, prefer any place that has outside seating, because I was talking to somebody today who went to ALA and got COVID, and then other people went to Anime Expo and got COVID. And
Right.
There's a pretty huge COVID outbreak everywhere right now. So I'm going to stick to outside as much as I can, because I don't want to get COVID again.
Is it safe to say that San Diego is your favorite con?
Yes. I mean, definitely. I mean, I think when I lived in Los Angeles, and you just drove down and it was easy to get a hotel room that was $80 a night. It was just the proximity of it, and obviously it hadn't become the giant spectacle that it is now. And for me, I mean, I keep comparing it to the Olympics or WrestleMania, but I've been in training for planning for Comic-Con since January. And I don't mean like every other day. I mean like pretty much every day I've had some Comic-Con planning activities since January.
I cannot even stress to you how much less planning I've done.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That's okay. You're not,
You also have a TV show that you're
I have a
going to be
TV
doing.
show that I'm going to be doing. And we're also announcing another giant project that I can't even talk about. That's even bigger than the TV show.
What the hell are you doing?
I know.
It's a big deal. It's taken a long time to plan ahead.
Yeah, this Comic-Con is my, 20th anniversary of the beat. And this year I'm really doing it up like crazy. So we just have so many things going on. And I did that purposely. It's not that I'm not busy, but it's also, I envy you. I envy the fact that you're going and you're having this new experience, and everything will be fresh to you. What did I do recently? I went to some place for the first time, and I know, I went to Pittsburgh. I went to Comics Pro, and I really enjoyed it. I'd never been to Pittsburgh. I'd never been to Comics Pro. And it was so rejuvenating for me to have this new experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And learn new things. So for Comic-Con, it's not about new things. It's more like, I always compare it to the Olympic skier. They say they have the course in their mind,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or the gymnast, the Olympic gymnast, they know their routine in their sleep. They practice it in their mind. They do it in their mind to prepare for the competition. And so in my mind, I already have I got to hit my marks. Like at 3:00 on Saturday, I got to do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's execution. It's not exploration.
Mine is going to be 100% exploration. It's actually kind of amazing how many firsts I'm having. I'm having the first of going to San Diego for the first time, or not. I've been to San Diego itself. I've never been to the Comic-Con.
Mm-hmm.
Going to the Eisners for the first time, obviously being nominated to, which should be really an interesting experience. And then I'm hosting a panel, which should be really interesting.
Yeah.
And so all of these things, it'll be a series of firsts. That's actually part of the reason why I said yes to the panel. I was actually I guess I could just say what it is. I think it's coming out this weekend. I'm hosting a panel. It's 20 years of Scott Pilgrim with Brian Lee O'Malley. And I've never done it before, and I like first-time experiences, so it should be really interesting. But let's talk about first-time experience. It is the 20th year of the beat. Your big news, until your next big news, I guess, is that you have a daily news show that you're putting together with Dean Devlin of Independence Day fame / Geostorm fame. But with Dean Devlin, his production company at San Diego Comic-Con, it's going to be a daily show that you compared to Inside the NBA to me, which actually absolutely really piqued my interest. How did that come together?
Well, we're only one segment is going to be inside the NBA. Like we're looking to do an hour because we have a media room. So we're going to have, nerd celebrities and hopefully, some celebrities. Actually, we do have some big name celebrities coming by. So we're going to have interviews with, I mean, longtime beat listeners will understand the import of this, but like Bruce Campbell is coming to Comic-Con. So he's coming to our media room. So we'll have a little interview with Bruce Campbell and, he's incapable of doing a bad interview. So that's great. So we'll have a lot of videos, but then we are doing it's not that long a segment, but we are doing maybe like a 15-minute segment where we get some experts together, myself and our host, Yael Teigel, and I hope you will be on. I got to send out the schedule for that, David, so don't let me forget.
I won't.
But and we say what we analyze the news at Comic-Con. Who won, who lost, who ruled, who drooled, and is James Gunn afraid of Hall H? I mean, the big questions like that. So
yeah,
how did this come together? Well, I want to give all the credit in the world to Patrick Meany, who is our director. So Patrick is the director of many comics documentaries. Several of the people that he made documentaries about I can't mention now, but one of them is about Image Revolution. He also produced She Makes Comics, and also there's one on Chris Claremont and one on Grant Morrison. So he's already knows how to make a documentary comics. So he actually works with Dean Devlin's company to do their after shows because, they have the ARC is on right now, and I guess the Librarians is coming back. So they have quite a few shows on. Yeah. So they do these after shows. So Patrick knew both the folks at Dean's company and me, and he was the one who was like, hey, you put peanut butter on my chocolate. And decided that maybe if we got together, it would be, a great opportunity for both of us. So, and I will say that, so Electric Now.
That's Dean Devlin's company?
That's Dean Devlin's company. Well, it's Electric Entertainment, but Electric Now is their app, which has all their programming on it. And so that includes these shows that are on Amazon and the after shows and, now Con Daily, which is the name of our show, Con Daily, powered by The Beat on Electric Now. That is the official title of the show. And you know what? I've interviewed him a few times, and he's really talked about just doing his own thing and having his own little mini streamlet, and doing this stuff. And it's kind of like the spirit of The Beat a little bit, It's like Independence Day, right? We're independent.
I think it's great. I think it's going to be a really cool thing. It's going to be a really interesting experience. I still have a hard time visualizing exactly what it's going to be. I just keep thinking about inside the NBA, but I think it's going to be, a lot of fun. And also it's really cool that you're going to do it on the 20th anniversary of The Beat. I mean, was that part of the arithmetic, or is it just like
just so happened? It just happened that way. Yeah, it just happened that way.
You just needed more things to do.
Yeah, just need more things to do. And like I said, one of the things, obviously I know how to put together a website and about comic book news because I've been doing it for 20 years. But, putting together a TV show is a little bit more outside my skill set. Although I did used to do public access TV back. You know what public access is?
I've seen Wayne's World. Of course I do.
Okay. So I did that back in the day when I lived in Los Angeles on Channel 3. And I did it here in New York a little bit when I moved here too. So I actually have done my own TV show before. But the one thing that I quickly learned was that other people know a hell of a lot more than I do about actually making a TV show in terms of filming and editing, and let them do what they do.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's great that you got to do a kind of new thing 20 years in, and you got to do something that times well, even if it's unintentionally. So you are doing actual on-screen stuff, because it seemed like most of the people that were doing on-screen were kind of listed in the announcement.
I am actually not doing a lot of the interviewing because that would kill me, first off. But I will be on the Inside the NBA section. Nice. We need to come up with a better title for it. We have a production meeting tomorrow, so we need to come up with a title. So I will be on that. I might do a couple of interviews.
I mean, Bruce Campbell.
Well, you know how many times I've interviewed Bruce?
Oh, I have no idea. Too many to keep track of.
Not that I wouldn't enjoy it. Any time spent with Bruce Campbell is time well spent. But no, Yael Teigel is our main host. She's actually been doing a lot of stuff for The Beat. She's been doing a lot of videos for The Beat over the years. She's one of our regulars. And she's awesome. So, and then We have Celia Schilling and Reagan York and Carrie Lane, and they're great. You know what? Let new people do it. Let new people with lots of energy do it who really want to do this and are good at it. So you know what? The Beat wouldn't listen, David, for real. Congratulations on your Eisner nomination,
Thank
by
you.
the way. Okay, you are the odds-on favorite. I don't want to jinx it or anything, but should you win, it would be very well deserved. And I think one of the reasons why it's well deserved is you do this by yourself, okay, which is mind-boggling to me. One of the reasons that the Beat has lasted 20 years is, although I did do it by myself for the first few years, I was a lot younger then. And, since then, I've been able to give a platform for a lot of amazing people and learn from them and give them a chance to learn and make their name for themselves. So wouldn't have made it 20 years without them. And so Con Daily is another opportunity to do that, really. So they wouldn't be the Beat if we didn't let other people
play in your sandbox.
Yeah, play in the sandbox and do fun stuff.
Well, and I think that's a perfect way to celebrate 20 years. You're doing some other stuff at the con for the Beats 20 years, aren't you?
Yes, I have the programming will be out, so everyone will know. But yes, I am. So at WonderCon, which is the first con, I'm doing a series of 20-year lookbacks, and I had a lot of Beat contributors on the one at WonderCon. So for this one, I'm spotlighting creators. And I have Raina Telgemeier and Scott McCloud and hopefully Scott Snyder. So who might have, if he's still speaking to me, but I think he is. And hopefully he'll be on the panel. And I might have a special surprise guest also. So, but if just those three people, I don't even have to say a word. So excited. And then just as a preview, my New York Comic-Con panel will be the publishers. So hopefully we'll have some publishing execs on there to talk about the last 20 years.
I'll be up in Alaska being antisocial and cold, so I'll miss out on that. But that sounds...
Well, you'll probably be recovering from San Diego Comic-Con.
Still, months later. God, I hope not. I had just a few more questions. I did have a question from a patron, Scott Hazelwood, who asked, I'm curious how each of you think the role of conventions has changed over the years. Do they mean different things for creators, publishers, journalists, and fans than they did 10 or 20 years ago? You know this better than I do.
Well, I'm working on a story, as if I didn't have enough to do. I'm also working on a story for Publishers Weekly that I think it will come out actually the Monday before Comic-Con, if not a little bit before, but just about kind of some of the news. I'm not going to spoil it, but some very big publishers are not coming to Comic-Con this year who have come for a long time. And Rob Salkowitz had a story today where he just talked to David Glanzer and talked about how expensive it is and how hotel rooms might be getting even more expensive next year. So I wrote a story about San Diego for Publishers Weekly already, and Ted Adams, the former publisher of IDW, said that you can't overestimate or downplay the importance of creators meeting their public and vice versa, the fans meeting the creators. So I do think that one-on-one integration that Comic-Cons foster, the one-on-one interaction is incredibly important. So yes, I think that's primal. I think meeting one of your favorite creators in any venue is super, super important to readers, to fans, and I think it's equally important to creators. So in that way, Comic-Cons have not changed, but just the expense of doing them has become so exorbitant. And that goes for trade shows. That's why there's no book expo anymore. It's like it just got too expensive and publishers didn't want to pay the money and didn't think there was a payoff. So we are seeing some rethinking of it. Now, that said, I know you don't watch wrestling, but I do. And now Gary Cohen and Ron Darling on my Mets podcast.
I know who those guys are.
Yeah, they were talking about this Fanatics Con.
Oh, God.
That's coming in August, right? I mean, it's being advertised so heavily everywhere. And obviously Fanatics is a company that has connections with every sports team. And, this is Comic-Con for sports. That's what they build it as, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll see. I mean, I've never seen an event promoted this much. And I also would think they wouldn't keep spending so much money if it was sold out. So obviously it isn't sold out. So we'll see. I think it's still important, but it's changing. Yes.
I got a lot of hate for Fanatics. I'm not going to lie. I mean, first off, the uniforms, I know that that's partially Nike's fault, but still for Major League Baseball. Second off, I'm sure you know nothing about this world, but they are like destroying the world of sports cards. And that's like a world that I once belonged to. And every once in a while dabble in, even though it's like terribly expensive. It's a horrible hobby. So expensive. But anyways, Fanatics, boo. But I will say, I do think that one of the things that's interesting about cons, and that's almost 100% changed it over the last 20 years, it's impossible to say that social media hasn't dramatically changed it, if only because, like, if you think about, I could just not go to Hall H and go to the Marvel panel, and I would find out the news like 5 seconds after anybody else would.
Right.
And, granted, there's nothing to recreate the vibe that's going to be in the room, the energy that's going to be in the room. I also don't want to stand in a line for like 14 hours, so I'm not going to do that. But I do think that that is one of the things from like a strictly like informational standpoint. They're not maybe as valuable, but there's something to be said for the buzz that they bring. And
yeah.
And for like the information delivery and for like making the connections and stuff like that. Like I mean, here's a good example. Like New York Comic Con last year, the biggest publishers there for comics were probably IDW and like Vault in terms of like direct market comics.
Right. Well, Marvel was there.
Yeah. Did you go to that booth? That was not Marvel Comics. But anyways, long story short, Marvel will be there this year. Image has got a booth. A bunch of other publishers have booths. And so it seems like it is a priority for direct market publishers to be at San Diego in a way that it isn't the other cons.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason, although IDW's booth is half the size it was last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was looking at the map. I probably will write that up next week when things calm down. And maybe I think part of the reason is that it is WrestleMania. Everybody wants to be on the card for WrestleMania,
Yeah.
Even if you're just the opening 20-man battle royale.
I remember it was a really big deal when Chuck Rosansky said he wasn't going to go anymore, but
yeah. And I just think that it's still an event that people aspire to go to.
Yeah.
That dream of going to. And the other thing that this just doesn't happen at New York the way it does at San Diego. You just literally don't know who you're going to run into. You don't know who you're going to meet or who's going to be there. Or, I've met so many people just, off the cuff, like standing around, a friend comes up and, then they're like, oh, this is, well, now I'm forgetting his name, but, so-and-so, he founded Weta, and I'm like, oh,
Peter
it's
Jackson?
nice to meet you. No, not Peter Jackson, the other guy, the guy who actually ran Weta. I think it's Williams. His name was Richard Williams or something.
Sure.
But, I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, so I watched all the extras on the DVD, so I knew him very well. Anyway, yeah, that happens all the time.
I personally can't wait until I find out that all of the coolest people stay in Coronado. And I'm going to be like, Heidi, check this out. Selfies.
I know you might actually be right about that, to be honest.
Probably not. We'll see. But last real question I have for you is, it is 20 years. 20 years is a banner achievement. You've been doing this for a long time. You've done a lot of different roles in comics, but it's been 20 years dedicated towards varying versions of the beat. Obviously, it is your job, but at the same time, like, what keeps you excited about it? Like, what gets you, I don't want to say up in the morning for it, but like, what gets you excited about doing the work and keeping like the beat alive?
Well, I think making it to 20 years was a big motivation. I mean, that was. I really was just like, you know what? If I make it to 20 years, nobody else has been blogging on their own for 20 years. I mean, one or two people have, but it's super duper hard to keep doing it. So anybody who has, I salute them. I think two reasons. The first reason is just that, I am my own boss. And when I get bored doing one thing, I can do another thing. I can be like, oh, I will do the TV show and I will let Deanna DeStito run the site because she's awesome. And she probably is better at it than me, right? She's our managing editor. And she's doing a phenomenal job right now. The other reason is, everybody has a different mindset about what they get, how they interact with the world. And my mindset, I'm able to now understand that this isn't the same mindset that everyone has. And that's one of the things about growing older. You realize that not everyone thinks exactly like you do. But one of the things that I love is I got to know what's next.
Yeah.
I got to know what's next. I got to know how the story ends.
That's your whole world.
I got to finish the story. And I got to know why it happened that way. I am Lois Lane. I am so curious about all these things. So that's it. I want to know what happens next. And then I also have a penchant for wanting to tell the world about it. So luckily running a blog, a website, a news blog is the perfect venue for that.
This is why you love this Mets team. It's got a whole lot of things for you to figure out. I mean, it's powered by Grimace from McDonald's and a utility infielder becoming a pop star. It's too weird to not love.
Wait, who's your team?
Seattle Mariners.
Right. Don't they have weird things happen too?
Oh yeah, all the time. They use a trident when they hit home runs. Unfortunately, they strike out like 35% of the time. So
that's not as good as Grimace.
No. I mean, well, they also have Mr. and Mrs. Met. I think that they've been kind of sidelined in the Grimace love affair.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Mrs. Met was the first female mascot.
I love it. I mean, you know what? The Mets have always had cool stuff. Like I love when Edwin Diaz comes out to that song. I forgot what the song is. That whole thing.
Timmy Trumpet.
Yeah, Timmy Trumpet. When it was happening last year, it was so damn cool. Like I actually watched videos of the Mets closer walking onto the field as a Mariners fan just because I thought it was cool. Also because Edwin used to be a Mariner. But at the same time, very cool stuff. But Heidi, you always have cool stuff going on. I hope you continue to be curious about the varying stories of the world. But that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on and talk about Boom's big news, San Diego Comic-Con, and everything else. I appreciate you taking the time.
All right, David. My pleasure. I'm glad I was coherent because it's been a hell of a day. Thank you, David.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with The Beat's Heidi MacDonald. You can find her on social media and her work at The Beat. Big thanks to Deanna Chapman for stepping in to edit this episode. If it sounds better than usual, it's because of her. Love Off Panel, want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today. You give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing it on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel. And when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast, as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my Eisner-nominated subscription comic site, Sketched, at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by following on Twitter and Instagram at @sketchcomic or following me at @slicefriedgold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including David Wilson, Joe, Benjamin Wilkins, Chris Hacker, John Neesmith, John Auerbach, Dustin Weaver, Ninja Assassin Love Story webcomic, Brandon Heyman, Aiden Hammond, Kenny Myers, Faith Aaron Hicks, Ah Yeah Comics, Ben Rowe, Cameron Brown, Jonathan Breen, Danny Ollie, Charlie Stickney, Tom Drennan, Jeremy Thomas Burke, Jared Schwab, Scott Dunn, Chip Mosherd, Seth Pomeroy, James McEwen, Andrew Lehman, Christina Merkler, Scott Place, Travis Gibb, Darcy Van Polgees, Travis Schmeiser, Tom Evans, Reed Beeman, Kelly Sudaconic, Max Wood, Jeremy Lambert, Brian Hole, Near Levy, Jason Hussa, Kieran Gillen, Jonathan Kent Uratam, Henry Johnson, Jingo Boren, James Tynan IV, Chris Langford, Jason Wood, Tom Peachy, Ben Domstead, Rom V, Nick Walker, Petra Coyle, Isaac Oren, Capes and Tights Podcast, Klaus Vandeven, Submed Industries, Jack Bull Queen, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Canadian by Proxy, Bradley Rader, Carl Troy, Brandon Pills, Patrick Brower, Declan Shalvey, Dan Garino, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, Leona Kingus, Nick Bennett, Daniel Whitfield, Susanna Polo, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, Andrew Creta, Stefan Hull, Philip Myra, Chris Pachala, Torrin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Ranwan, Vita Yala, Akil, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, David Kelly, Nick Polito, Jason Assey, Adam Bogert, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendrick, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Colin McMahon, Adam Heifel, Fiona Staples, Mark Abbott, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comic Star in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Wolfpack for letting me use their song Outro as the show's opening theme, and to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's outro and ad music just for the show. Check out both their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.